Hey there, it's DM Scott. That's right, I'm talking to you. Yeah, you, the chubby guy wearing the This Is How I Roll t-shirt. Why don't you ditch that ratty old t-shirt that's 2 sizes too small for you? Where'd you get that? Baby Gap? Head on over to our Merch and More store on our epic new website. Grab yourself some Dungeon Masters Dojo logo wear. You won't regret it. Rock that t-shirt like the nerd boss you are. It's sleek and it's black, and everyone knows that black is slimming. Hell, I look like a slender 3XL when I'm wearing this black shirt. Not only will you look deceptively less chunky, but with that bold red and white logo, you look like a superhero. And who doesn't want to look like a superhero? So head on over to the DungeonMastersDojo.com merch and more to fill your bag with our swag. See you next time in the dojo. So your time has come to sit in the big chair. No, I don't mean captaining your own starship. I mean running the game. Whatever you call yourself, sitting in the seat is a big responsibility. So we're here to help you. It's knowing your role this week on the Dungeon Masters Dojo.
Greetings and salutations, DMs, GMs, referees, judges, and all other varieties of storytellers. I am Lewis, and as always, I'm accompanied by the Ayatollahs of Dice Rollers, our hosts, Scott and Bill. Hey, Scott. Hey, Bill. How you guys doing this evening?
Excellent. Yourself?
Yeah, not bad. We're doing a podcast.
Well, this is a new and interesting thing, huh?
Yeah,
yes, it is.
Lots of chords and technology and stuff like that. It's
Well,
the big leagues now.
I guess if you want to call it the big leagues, yes, we will.
I think a more medium league, but
Yes. So why don't you tell us on what we're going to be talking about this evening, Scott?
It's knowing your role. Well, what is it exactly that's expected of you as a dungeon master? What do you do?
That's something I need to know because I'm here learning to be the DM one day.
Well, we're gonna hopefully teach you.
give you a few pointers here and there.
Yes, and not just me, but everybody else that's going to be listening to this. I think this will be good for everybody.
That's good. I guess we had like 33 people or something close to that listening to our session 0. So that's, I don't know if that's good or not, but I'm pretty happy that there's 33 people between the United States and Canada that.
And we're doing it organically right now, too. We're not even putting the word out there yet.
No pesticides, no harsh fertilizers, totally organic.
Yep.
I know I'm free range. I've been caught grazing in the backyard more than once.
All right, so take us on our journey, and we'll get started.
Well, being the dungeon master, I think we touched on this a little bit in our session 0. Not too much, but just enough to give you a little taste of it. It's a pretty big job. There's a lot more to it than being just a player enjoying themselves at the table. It's a different kind of enjoyment. I don't know if you would agree with that or not, Bill. But
I've been game mastering probably a whole lot more than playing. I mean, don't get me wrong, I enjoy playing, but the whole scenario about being the game master has always been very, very attractive to me for a number of reasons. A lot of those we're going to be going over, but yeah, that's I think probably out of the multiple decades I've been doing this, probably spent 10 years as a gamer, player, and another 40 as the game master.
So with that said, if somebody's just getting started into gaming, what is the first thing that they should be doing to be ready to be a GM or a game master?
Buy all the books.
Yeah. Definitely buy all the books. And sit next to that person in the gaming group that really knows the rules a lot better than you, because it's hard to learn all the rules and create a campaign or even a 4-hour session. There's a lot of work that goes into it, believe it or not. To do it well, it requires a lot of balancing. It requires a lot of research, or at least on my part. I like to do a lot of research into things. what makes a well-balanced encounter. So sit next to that guy or that gal that knows the rules a lot better than you do. They're going to be very, very helpful. Whenever I'm running our big game, there's always someone at that table, whether it be Jared or Coric, that just knows the rules far better than I.
There's something to be said for having a rules lawyer in your pocket, because again, at the older versions, I knew the rules inside and out. I can quote you not only what page it was in which book, but which paragraph, which column. The newer versions, I haven't delved into it that deep. I'm more concentrating on the story. So like you said, it's good to have that one person that knows the rules in and out, where you can just kind of give a sideways glance and you get the nod yes or the nod no, or the rolling of the eyes going, oh crap, I really screwed that one up.
Well, I think we've been kind of lucky with our group, whereas our rules lawyers, if you want to call it, they just help us all out at the same time. They don't use the rules for themselves, and they don't use the rules to hinder people at the same time.
Right.
It's when it really comes in handy, is when there's that impartial approach to the rules, especially when we started playing 5th edition, because we went from 2nd edition
2.5.
Yeah, 2.5 to 5. So we skipped decades, and that was a system I was very comfortable with. I didn't have the obnoxious habit that Bill did of being able to quote the page the rule was on, but I was pretty well versed in the rules, even if I was rusty from a layoff. So having that person that really knows their stuff is huge help.
I'm going to agree with that. Yeah, because the couple times I did it, I looked from inspiration from you guys, both of you, and the other players at the table, just to feel comfortable sitting at the head of the table, because you are the storyteller, and there's a lot going on, and it's hard.
Yeah, it is. Even if you've been doing it for a while, it could be challenging, especially. And I think every group has players like this. They throw you those curveballs you weren't expecting.
I think that takes us to one of our points pretty quickly too. We're talking about make sure you have your rules, make sure you have your books, make sure you have people.
That's important.
Just having 2 people on your campaign could be a little monotonous after a while. But get a group of people that are interested, and then the next thing is put together a story.
So, what do you think about the pre-written, the retail stories?
The modules?
Yeah. Do they call them modules anymore?
I don't think they call them modules. Again, I'm going back to 2.5.
Yeah, that's what they used to call them.
We're dating ourselves. The prefab stuff, I've never been a fan of them. I'll purchase them, I will read them, I will dissect them, and take parts of a variety of them, put them together, and use them in my own campaign, in my own scenarios. It's like, oh, that's a really cool set of traps, or that's a really good encounter, or that's a really good this, or the castle layout on this one's actually fantastic for what I have in mind. So to actually follow them, and don't get me wrong, they have their merit, and for people who are just starting, I think it's a great way to get going, so you don't have to be the one that comes up with all the stuff, especially if you're not one of those people that are gifted with an overactive imagination.
Or if you don't have time,
there's always that too. You need to put something together really quick. But I've never been a person who really uses them very often, at least not in the form that they were printed in. I've dissected them, and I've used bits and pieces and melded them together into a brand new monster. And that's how I've used them.
I tried to use them once, and I just found them a little bit more confusing than the way I would have did it the way you guys showed me to, is how you do your layout on the paper. Mm-hmm. And to me, that was a problem for me.
Yeah, I have to really get inside my head to run a game, and I can't do that usually with the retail modules or campaigns. The stuff that Wizards of the Coast is putting out now is really pretty, but it's big.
Yeah,
and it's almost like doing homework. Whereas the smaller ones, the paperback, deals that had that were probably hand stapled in Gary Gyjax's basement by him and a bunch of his buddies. They were a little bit more manageable in size and more of an outline really than anything else. They weren't really in depth pieces of work. And I think that was what contributed a great deal to me being able to create my own stories or campaigns. Was there was a lot of stuff back then that you really had to fill in that just isn't there now. And I haven't run any of these new campaigns, but I own all of them. I don't know why, it's a habit, but I like to look through them and read them, and they're a lot more in depth than the older stuff. I guess it's a sign of the times.
Well, I think they're just trying to bring their world to life now more than it was before.
Yeah, and they're doing a pretty good job of it. I would say there's not a lot of gaps you have to fill in. But then again, the big difference between then and now, and you remember this, both of you, is the world was a brand new place, and now we're 40, 50 years into Faerun.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how long it's been for Dark Sun or any of these other things, but it was high school for me when these things started coming out. So it's, there's been decades to kind of flesh it out. It's grown a lot.
Yep.
Agreed. As it takes us back to the story.
Hey, well, you're a storyteller. I mean, that's pretty much your...
That's exactly what you are. You're a storyteller. And how you paint the picture, how you put it out there. I've always said it, we use the term theater of the mind a lot, but it's not filling in the blanks. It's painting the picture for them. So everyone hears it and interprets it differently. But the more detail you put into it, the less interpretation is necessary for the individuals. So that way they're more likely to follow the directive that you've put forward and see the same picture that you envisioned with detail. I think detail is a big thing.
It's huge.
Oh, I agree.
Or you walk into a bar. Okay, what's it look like? It's a bar.
Yeah. What's it smell like?
Yeah.
How many people are in it?
Yeah. Or you walk into the bar, you hear a crunching underfoot, you look down, you see sawdust all over the floor. Some of it's soaked in blood, some of it's soaked in beer, some of it's soaked in something you don't want to identify.
Urine.
As you look up into the bar, you see blah, 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 blah. Paint the picture so when they step into the bar as a group, everyone's for the most part seeing the same thing. Now I'm looking for this because I'm a thief, and I'm going to look for this because I'm the fighter, and I'm going to look for this, for different reasons. Everyone's going to have their class. Everyone's going to be looking for different things, which is fine. But the broad stroke should be less broad. And all the encounters as well, describing your monsters, describing what you're seeing, describing the buildings. Description is really important.
And it's a big, big part of the DM's job. Like when you're doing that, you're on stage, like all eyes are on you, and they're absorbing everything, and their imaginations and their minds are kind of filling in the blanks. One of the things that I really like to do that we've started doing in the past couple of years is using terrain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge help because you can set up a scene so that, theater of the mind still comes into play, but now you have this scene in miniature. You have that tavern where they're looking at it and going, okay, the floors are wood, and there is that hay there, and that does kind of look like a blood stain, and that.
You don't have to ask how many tables, how many chairs. There are tables, there are chairs, there are figs in those chairs or represented in those chairs. You know where the bar is. Where's the bar? Well, you don't have to. You look it's right there. It's on the left-hand side. You don't have to just take the time to describe a lot of those things because they're right there in front of them.
It takes a huge load off of what you have to do as far as providing the description. And one of the other things we started doing, especially at our big game, because we have a lot of time to kind of set the scene, so to speak, is background music.
Yeah.
And I think the players really, really like that. And we've even started playing around with background sounds. So if we're at the tavern Bill's talking about, we have tavern music playing. You know, maybe you're hearing things clank around
Yeah.
and people laughing, and that really helps set the mood and get the players.
Oh, definitely. I'll use one example. Like when we were playing at our yearly game this year, when Jared lost his armor and he was getting his armor back, you had set the Avengers theme music up, and it brought chills to everybody because they were like, "This is happening. This is epic," especially because he was a paladin and he lost his armor.
Yep. Yeah, and it kind of put the spotlight on that one character. You know, it's nice to have your moment. You know?
Oh, absolutely.
Everybody has that kind of shared moment, and they walk away going, "Wow, that was pretty cool." And that's an integral part of the storytelling, I think, is really knowing your players and knowing their characters and seizing that opportunity to give them their moment. I remember the first 7-year run of our week-long gaming vacation. I was playing with little cutscenes, giving some background for Lou's character.
I remember that.
And he escaped a prison in his past using a sled that he made out of a blanket soaked with body fluids, and he slid down the mountain to safety. But this little cutscene happened right after he did something very similar to that.
Oh yeah, you're sliding on a shield downstairs into a crowd of
enemies, basically acting as a bowling ball, and it was pretty cool because
when you did that, it gave, especially me, it gave me like the wow moment because I didn't even realize that was part of a cutscene, and then when you put that in there at the same time, it was like, holy shit, that's pretty cool.
Well, that's also part of, like you said, knowing your players and what they're going to do, what they're likely to do, because you're sitting there. You're setting up the story. You're also an arbitrator of disputes, but you also just kind of sit back and let them have their moments. And as they're having their moments, you're just watching and how do they react to this and how do they react to that. And the good game masters will put this in the little, like I call the dusty Rolodex, I call a brain, and remember this for later and say, well, he did this, he did this, he did this. Well, there's a pattern. You recognize those patterns. You write your scenario, give them their moment, and play to that pattern. And more often than not, they're not going to disappoint. They're going to do what you thought they were going to do because you set there. All right, let's set up the pins and let's see if he, takes a shot at them. And they always do.
Yep,
they always do. Yep. And that's another good part about telling the story is knowing your players enough where you can set these little scenes up. And it also helps keep things on track because we all know the players have a tendency to take your table and all of a sudden make a hard left turn when you're expecting them to go right or straight. So, if you know your characters well enough, that's a good way to not only keep the story going, but also get it back on track if it's necessary.
And get that player investment.
Oh, absolutely. Player investment's huge.
Huge.
Yep, it is. I can't say enough about some of the stories you guys put together. Just with us talking about what happened after the gaming sessions is usually our highlight for us when we do that. But you mentioned something, when a character takes that left turn, how would you bring them back into the turn you need them to be on?
Well, like I said, there's a couple different ways. I just mentioned one.
Right.
You can always, transplant one of your encounters, put it up in front of them, and once again, it's going to play to the strengths or weaknesses of one of the characters, and they're going to do exactly what you think you're going to do, and the consequences put them right back on track. So there's a tons of methods that I use. That's one, is having flexible and transplantable encounters. It doesn't have to be in this one spot. It can happen anywhere, and the outcome puts them right back on track.
And sometimes if you just roll with it, it's gonna right itself and find its way back on its course. One example was a few years ago there was an encounter where the party came across a fighter cleric who was making his last stand against some baddies, and he was the encounter was such that, you know, he would give some information with his dying breath, but the party, as players are apt to do, you know, threw a crazy Ivan in there and mopped up the floor with the baddies before he had a chance to die and healed them. And he traveled with them for the remainder of that week and ended up becoming a player character of one of our players who hadn't been there that year, and who played him in such oddly bizarre and endearing fashion that it was heartbreaking to see him go when he did. So sometimes you just, you know,
you
keep
roll
it
with
organic,
it.
you know, and
roll with it, because they're as great as your imagination is, the collective of your table will outdo you every time.
yeah, you know, your outline is really, really important, and you got to have that outline for that story if you're running something of your own design. But you have to be really flexible, and sometimes just let it happen and see where the players take it, because they'll take it into territory that you can't imagine.
Right.
You know, there's always that wild card. There's that player that will come up with outlandishly creative things to do that, you know, has the potential of derailing your game. We all know who that guy is, right, Lou?
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't think I've ever done that.
You know, one of the well, there's
Not by accident.
yeah, we don't have enough time today for that.
It's a whole episode by itself.
Yeah, it is. How to handle a Lou. But the other thing too is you have to maintain that momentum. You know, you have to maintain the momentum of the story so it doesn't kind of stall out.
No, and I think what you said earlier, like your background music helps to do that as well. Keep the momentum going with the flow of the story. At least from what I've seen when you used it.
Yeah, and really I think I use this term a lot. It's really more of an art form than it is a science.
Agreed.
You have to it's got to feel right to begin to propel them, you know, forward with something. If it doesn't, then you really should just let it work itself out until that right opportunity comes, without stalling them out, so they end up with analysis paralysis, and they're kind of like chasing their tails or just walking around in circles. You know, what do we do now?
Yeah. So how do you keep a story going so that doesn't happen? Then, give us an example.
Sometimes I like to insert an NPC into the party because, well, for the biggest reason being is there's always that glimmer of hope that someday I'll be able to play, and that's you know, it's just a matter of taking the notes on the NPC and converting it to a character so that someday one of my friends who's supposed to really like me will say, you know what, I'm going to give you a break and you can play, and I'll run the game. It hasn't happened yet.
Yes, it has.
But sooner or later.
Well, that's because when we draw the straws, everyone snaps them in half, and they're like, oh, we all have short straws. Well, not this time.
So that NPC I kind of use as a voice, and I use it as a voice in a very different fashion. I try to stay away from the all-knowing NPC where everybody's like, oh, well, we're going to do what that guy says or that girl says. Sometimes they're wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes they're right. And sometimes they're kind of sort of in the middle, or they really don't have a lot to lend to it, depending on what kind of character it is. But I use that I use that voice to kind of prime the pump a little bit and get a discussion going about something if the discussion's kind of stalled out, or if there's inter-party conflict, which happens quite a bit.
Constantly and consistently.
And there's got to be conflict for drama, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, it adds element to the story.
It does. You know, one big happy family is boring.
That's why I never watched the Brady Bunch.
Yeah, they're boring. As long as nobody's drawing blood or too much blood,
because we have drawn blood.
Everything's fine. Yeah,
too much is probably better.
And I usually like to use one of Bill's tactics, and if you're kind of stalling out, I'll throw an encounter your way, and that will usually keep it going.
Yep.
When I write too, a lot of times I'll have non-story specific encounters. I usually have a cache of them. So if it looks like there's a kind of a, not necessarily a dead end, but a stalling point, you're waiting for somebody who had to run out and get the pizza. You had, and the rest of the table's like, and you don't want to lose that momentum. You don't want to lose that feel. You can pull one of those out. The old man who won't move his cart and pulls out his shovel and starts swinging at the paladin. What's the paladin going to do? He's not going to beat up the old man. There's other players that will be, in most cases.
The rogue played by Lou might.
Yeah, there's always going to be the characters that go, I'll take care of it.
Or the fighter played by Lou might.
Or the cleric played by Lou.
There's always just cause.
I will heal him right off this pathway. But you throw a non-story specific encounter. Have 2, 3, 4 of these things, squirreled away, and if you use one up, make a couple more. And it's a good way to kind of keep the momentum going. And again, a lot of times these things will grow a life of their own, and when they do, you run with it. It might turn into an NPC that is going with the party. It might turn into someone who has some information to get them back on the path that they can find something. If it isn't a person, it's an object that will get them back on path or give them a direction, compass point or cardinal point, if nothing else. So there's a variety of ways to kind of get them back on the path.
Yeah, you have to adjust on the fly.
Oh, yeah. There's, like I said, you pull the crazy. They're going to pull the crazy Ivans constantly, and some characters do it on purpose. They look for. Oh, yeah, no, we're not talking about you again, Lou.
Not this time. No.
Well, not mostly. There are some characters that's their enjoyment is. All right, let's see how we can derail it this time.
So, yeah, and there is that fine line too. You have to maintain between the sandbox and the railroad. There's if it's if too much of a sandbox, then they're going to spend their night drinking and carousing in the next town they find and forget that they're on a mission to save the world or whatever it happens to be. So you have to kind of nudge them along, and sometimes you have to really adjust the stats of a monster on the fly. You think you got these players figured out, and they just steamroll over your big bad.
Well, every now and again, instead of acting independently like they almost always do, out of the clear blue sky, they decide, hey, let's work together. And this one piles onto that one, onto this one, and this attack. And they come up with a tactic that's absolutely phenomenal. And you're right, they roll over your big bad.
Yeah, it happened to me a couple of years ago. I had a really I even had the fig for it, too, which I was pumped about. And it was going to be a tough battle. At least in my mind, that's what it was. It was going to be really hard and really challenging.
On paper, it was amazing.
It was. It was great. It looked great on paper, and I rolled probably the worst in it. One of the many times my dice really kind of screwed me over. I was dead last, and they obliterated him.
I think it lasted one round.
Yeah, and he didn't even get an attack. And as they're just laying the smackdown on him, I'm like, okay, I'll half the damage. I got to give these guys a challenge. And even doing that, it was just done. It was embarrassing.
You all have to keep in mind that Scott's dice never work
in his favor.
He buys a new set. Every year we go away for our 1 week gaming, he buys a new set, sometimes two, and then almost immediately resists the urge to huck them out into the ocean, which is just a couple 100 yards down the road.
They do me dirty.
He's the only person I've ever known that rolled less than a 1 on a D20. He rolls that bad.
Yeah, it's sad, and my players at my table, they rejoice.
We know it.
And they laugh at me. And it's and they're just cruel.
Well, from the other room, we hear the heckling and the laughter,
Yeah.
and
you join in,
and we can almost hear them pointing at you. It is that enjoyable for them because we run multiple tables. He'll game master one, and I'll be game master the other on parallel storylines, and our whole table will all of a sudden hear this uproarious, raucous and laughing, and it's like, oh, Scott rolled the one again,
and the insensitivity is contagious.
Oh, it's glorious to watch.
It's enjoyable.
It's glorious to watch. It's kind of like a train wreck full of puppies and unicorns.
One of these days, I'll find that set of dice that truly appreciates me.
You've been saying that for 12 years.
Well, I'm bound to at any minute find that.
It'll be our 20th year.
It'll be
the hunt goes on.
Yeah,
Yep.
Search continues for the magical dice,
and the numbers will be too small for me to see.
That's good. We'll just buy you a bigger magnifying glass
Or a bigger set of dice.
or bigger. Yeah. Wow.
So, you were talking about inter-party conflict.
Yes.
How do you deal with that so nobody gets their feelings hurt?
If it, we have a pretty insensitive group of players.
They're heartless.
Yeah, they have thick
absolutely
skin.
And not just to the game master, to each other as well.
They, they'll threaten one another's lives, like for real, and then be fine with it afterwards. So that's good. Inter-party conflict,
It's going to happen.
yeah, it's just if it's something that moves the storyline forward, I think it's great.
Oh yeah, let it play out.
Yeah, especially if it's like opposed ideologies, opposed approaches towards something, a solution. One person, they don't want to harm their prisoner. They just want to question them. The other person wants
Torture,
to
burn their feet.
Let's
pull their
torture
fingernails.
them so the other one knows we're serious.
It works.
Yep.
We knew you'd say that.
So we know which side of the coin Lou is on, always. And usually, I think the only time inter-party conflict can be wildly entertaining.
Absolutely.
And I think it does a lot for development of characters and stories too, because I've seen characters just grow and develop in maybe, I don't know, maybe for lack of a better term, they may not always agree with the other character's approach towards things, but after interacting with them for a number of years, there's a mutual respect.
It's either that or they just figured out a workaround.
Yeah, and that's and some of it is that too.
That's often where the comedy comes from.
Yes. Yep.
Where and there's dozens of stories that we could tell about that. Most of them involving Lou. So when it becomes a problem, I don't know if you agree or not, is when it's inter-party conflict amongst players.
That's a tougher one.
Yeah.
The player, the characters, it is just, that's what it says on my sheet, and that's usually the first go-to. And there's ways to work around that. But when it's the players themselves, that can become real tricky. And my usual go-to is you can always tell who's the instigator.
Yeah, and that'll stop a story. That'll take a story in a game to a screeching halt.
Oh, it'll destroy an entire scenario, and it'll destroy an entire gathering. I mean, there are players that won't show up.
Yeah, that's what we want to try to avoid at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So my first tactic is to catch that one person as they're coming into the game or as they're leaving, a little one-on-one away from everyone else, saying, dude, this is what's happening. This is what you're doing. Are you doing it on purpose? Or is this just, and it's like, well, that's what my character says. No. I don't care what your character sheet says, right? This is what you're doing. And you can't blame it on the piece of paper because the piece of paper isn't driving the character.
Yeah.
You are.
Right.
And if it keeps happening, right, there's going to be changes. And I don't want to do that. I want everyone to have a good time, including you. but your good time does not come at the expense of everyone else. And if that's the case, the one is going to suffer, not the many.
And sometimes they may not even realize it. That might have been a bad habit that they had carried from another gaming group.
Well, when they gamed in the cellar with their two cousins and their younger brother who mom made you let them into the game. You're right. And which is why I say one of the first things, do you realize you're doing it, and are you doing it on purpose?
Yeah, because sometimes they don't.
A lot of people don't.
Yeah, I've had players say, I didn't realize that. And they have used that's what my character says. And you're right. The characters are driven by the player. There's a social contract, I think, that you have that may or may not be vocalized at the table, but it's for everybody's enjoyment.
Yeah.
It
is supposed to be a cooperative game.
Yeah. See, I treat the character sheet as a guideline.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good way to approach it. It's very much so the outline of your character, much like your notes are the outline of a campaign.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, there's hard numbers on there that you have to go by. It's like, I'm going to interpret my strength as being stronger this time. No, your strength is what's on the character sheet. But we're talking about the character flaws and the disadvantages, and let's say now you have your bonds and your flaws in the 5th edition. Before, it was a variety of different secondary skills, and that's what my skill is. You can't fall back on the sheet saying the sheet made me do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
not an answer.
It's kind of a cop out, and it may not be so much that sometimes as it is just an unseasoned player. I think playing with a bunch of different groups over your time really gives you a good idea of what good gameplay is, and good gameplay is simply enough. Is everybody having a good time? You're not stepping on anybody's toes intentionally, and when you're called on it, you change that behavior, offer an apology, and move on. It's when you get folks that have had very limited gaming experiences that you run into a lot of those problems.
Absolutely, true.
Yeah, that's because they haven't had a chance to mature to the game yet.
Right. And sometimes they're just. There's an individual that's contrary.
This is true, and that's their persona, that's their makeup.
Yeah,
and they're going to do the opposite just because that's what they do. And we have our share of those as well.
Yep.
And you learn to deal with it because and it takes you back to the beginning where you know what your players are going to do sometimes before they do. And when you're writing your story, when you're writing your scenario, you're writing your encounters. You can almost expect what's going to happen. And you take into play the people who are going to be your power characters are going to stand up there and, all right, I'm going to take the hit for everybody. And who's going to be the one that sneaks around, always tries to sneak around from the back. It's a little girl selling flowers. I'm going to sneak up behind her so I can get double damage on a surprise attack. She
might be a demon in disguise.
Or she's 6 years old and she's selling posies at a copper each to help her family. What the hell are you doing? But you know who's going to do what. So you should be thinking ahead of time. All right, this is the encounter. This is what's I want to happen. We know that's not going to happen, but what are they going to do? And Mrs. Contrary is going to do what they're going to do. So you should think of a counter for it ahead of time.
Yeah, and that's why it's key to be prepared. Being prepared though is that's tricky too. You want to be prepared, but you don't want to be over prepared because if you're over prepared, you just wasted a lot of time.
Right.
And you don't have that wiggle room. You're too rigid.
I think it causes more confusion too.
Yeah, it's like it's like an oak in the wind, kind of.
Yeah.
It's going to crack if it doesn't sway, and that's kind of like your campaign or your game session for that evening. You got to be able to sway in the breeze a little bit.
Well, I think a lot of that too comes with experience. You're going to use your past experiences. All right, this happened, that happened. I'm going to go with it this way. Oh, I've seen this happen before. All right, the last time I used this and it worked, I'm going to use it again. with a slight variance. So again, experience comes into play. For those that don't have the experience, which is kind of why we're doing this whole podcast in the first place.
You're welcome.
Ta-da.
Thank you.
Yes, take it off mute.
Yes, I will. Still learning.
But that's just it. We're trying to give you a few ideas. Now, we've talked about a problem. All right, how about a couple answers? How are you going to arbitrate this? Let the book decide. You let them fight it out. Let it run its course for a little bit until you have to recorrect it. It falls to who your players are, who your game master is. You have to take the feel of your table. And if it feels like, okay, all right, do that. All right, that's enough. All right, let's get back on track. Boom, done. You might have to take a hard fist and go, all right, that was fun for a while, but okay, I'm going to pull out the retroactive card and we're going to start right back to here because you guys are a bunch of idiots. So what are you going to do from this point forward? And if and that usually corrects it if they decide to go hardcore on you and say, well, let's screw them up real bad. You got that. Or you can, like I said, you can let the books decide. All right, here's the encounter, here's the monster, here's its effects. Just run it off the numbers. And that's the way it happened. Okay, for good, bad, or ugly, that's the way it happened. But I want to do this. I'm sorry, but the book right there says.
Right.
All right. So you can go rules lawyer on them, which actually works a lot of times with your rules lawyers.
Sometimes. And surprisingly not often enough with your rules lawyers.
Well, that's because they have another rule to get around it. But a lot of times, I think sometimes you just have to just nip it in the bud right out and say, all right, well, okay, well, that was fun, but we realize that didn't happen, okay? We're going to go back to this point, and that's where we're starting from. If it doesn't have to be that bad, then just let them duke it out. With each other, like I said, a lot of times the inter-party conflict builds friendships where you didn't think friendships would be between the characters. The players is another matter. But then again, a lot of times the inter-party conflicts transfers to the players, and the players will talk it out after the fact, going, I did it because of this. Oh, I didn't realize you had that as a flaw. All right. Oh, gee, I thought you're just simply being an idiot. No, it's part of my character flaw.
You didn't have to look at me when you said that.
Sorry.
Because we all knew who you were talking about.
My eyes naturally gravitated that direction because something caught my eye. You made me lose my train of thought. Thanks. Remember, I'm old. I derail easy.
Well, Scott, I told you it was going to happen.
Yeah, it was only a matter of time. And, one of the other big things, too, I think this is key to being good at your craft as a DM is you're a character actor. Mm-hmm. And you're a character actor like those character actors in movies or TV shows. Those faces you see all the time. You have to be every other person in the world other than the player characters.
Well, I tell the characters all the time, see that piece of paper in front of you? That's you. Me, I'm the rest of the flipping universe.
Yeah, and that's as difficult to manage sometimes as being the storyteller because you're all these different personalities. And under normal circumstances, you'd probably need medication because it's not healthy. But you have to pull these other personalities out of the air and keep it entertaining and use body language between different NPCs, accents if you could do accents. Even if you can't, do it anyway.
Yeah, bad accents is still fun.
Yeah.
We've been doing that a lot lately.
Yes,
lately, accents have been cropping up. The fun part is when you start a Scottish accent, and by the end of the night, everyone has a Scottish accent.
Or I usually start a Scottish accent, and I end up relocating to Australia at some point in time, and I get called on it. One of the big things is make them. It sounds weird saying this about a fantasy role-playing game, but make them believable like they're real people.
Yeah, make them realistic.
So not every tavern owner is a retired adventurer.
That's called role-playing.
Yeah. Sometimes they're
Yeah, not everyone has that sword that's on the plaque above the bar. That you're right. Just
sometimes there's someone's grandma,
right,
who just owns a tavern.
Yeah, that's it. Just a little old lady who owns a tavern.
Yep,
nothing special.
And being the villain too is another difficult one. I think being the villain is always tricky because you don't want to default to that black hat.
No.
You're twirling the mustache, and you're tying the lady to the railroad tracks.
Snidely whiplash.
Yeah, it's.
Oh my God, I dated myself
Yes,
again.
you did.
No, that's right. Well, Penelope Pitstop was the blonde strapped to the railroad tracks.
Yep.
So, but that's a difficult portrayal to have. I think it's always best to make them understandable and relatable. Not everybody wants to see the world burn. Sometimes there's that crazy one that does and is just like nuts.
Why'd you look at Lou?
And they're fun.
you're not supposed to look at me.
But you watch Black Panther. After halfway through the movie, we went to see that when we were on vacation. Halfway through the movie, I'm like, Killmonger's not that bad of a guy. I can get behind what the statement he's making.
Yeah.
And even kind of Darth Vader. Everybody uses Darth Vader as an example, but I think he's a pretty good example. You're like, okay, this guy ended up this way because of all the bad stuff that happened to him, and he was actually kind of looking at doing something good, but
someone else was pulling the strings, and
so those believable villains or those relatable villains that
I think relatable is a better word.
Relatable, makes people scratch their head, makes those players go like, geez, I don't know what side I'm on now.
Yeah. Is he the bad guy, or is he just a good guy who's not as good as I thought?
Yeah.
Or is the bad guy not as bad as I thought? And you're right. I think a lot of it is throwing some relatability in there, whether it's real world parallels, or you skirt them on the dark edge where everyone's in the gray area. Or I was hired by this guy, so that makes him the good guy because I'm working for him, and you find out that he's not the good guy. Another, he was charismatic, he was nice, he gave me things, and he's the bad guy. And the other one who's shooting at me, he's the good guy. How did I end up on the other side? I'm supposed to be the good guy.
Yeah, sometimes they don't know. It's hard to track it back to it.
But that's when you've pulled it off, is when they kind of look confused at you going, I thought I was the good guy. Why am I being chased? Why isn't my name on the wanted poster? I'm supposed to be chasing the guy who's on the wanted poster. I'm next to him now. How the hell did that happen?
That's a good question. How did that happen, Scott?
So you're right. Yeah. The
player agency. That's how it happened.
The villain is the fun one to play, but you're right.
Always.
It is definitely more difficult to be able to put that together and make it believable, make it relatable, make it so it starts off black and white and then slowly fades into gray, and then it comes out purple, pink, and orange, and you're like, where the hell am I now? But then they got to figure it out, and that's what drives them. That's what keeps, hopefully that's what drives them and keeps them coming back for more, going, okay, if we just talk to this one other guy, maybe we'll figure it out, and let them chase that guy, and whether they catch him or not, and whether it clears it up or just muddies the water even further. But yeah, the villains are the fun ones to play. And
that's where the inter-party conflict really gets interesting, because you have different viewpoints on morality.
Oh yeah. Well, even if it's just simple point of view, even if you don't take morality into it, just simple point of view. This is how I interpret it, and that's how you interpret it, and we're not on the same page. And
that happens quite often.
Yeah, and
if it's done
great.
right,
yeah.
If it's done right, yeah.
It's awesome when it's done right.
Yep.
When it's just like people drawing swords, or bows or what, I shoot them. That's the response. You disagree with me, I shoot him. We don't have too much of that in our group.
No. They usually wait and see, then shoot them when they turn around.
Well, Well, some people do. There's some people that will still walk up there and shoot them.
Yeah, true. That also, now that takes us on to the next topic. Where do you set your guidelines? Where do you set your rules?
That's tricky, and that intermingles with, being an arbiter of disputes, and we talked about that a little bit at the beginning. Where do you set your rules? I like the idea of a session zero. Session zero is kind of divisive. Some people think it's silly. Other people swear by it. I think it's kind of good to set that rule set out.
I definitely agree with that. Not only that, it gives all the characters a chance to talk amongst themselves either, because you guys remember, your session zero, you sometimes know each other, sometimes you don't. But at least you can get a perspective on where everybody's coming from.
Right. That would, backgrounds come into play. We've always been real big on, write your backgrounds, your backgrounds. And when we do our week-long getaway, if you write a background, you get experience points. You get extra points for a decent background, because not only does it set your character, but it also gives the game master something to use with, for, and against you. Mm-hmm. But it also, you can see how that plays against the other characters. So if they're willing to give a portion of that up, the other characters can use that to moderate where they look at you, where they sit into it. So the session zero is a good place to hammer that out, where you can give your pieces of your background, saying, well, this is where I come from. It's like, well, hey, I came from that too. Hey, why don't we just come from the same place? We know each other. Okay, boom, done.
A perfect example is our last game. I think Quirk was here. We ended up, because we kind of chose the same background. We were both abused by our parents. We just said, why don't we just come from the same parents, I should say. Yeah. I stayed and he left, so he was the outcast. But because of that, we were able to forge that little bit of a story between us.
Yeah, a little bit of a bond.
Yeah.
And then that works out well. And that panned itself out in session zero.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. Some people don't go by them. For us, it's worked because because we can turn around and give a base outline on the story before they even start their characters. And it's like, okay, now our session zero often is your character creation. And we'll give them some guidelines. We'll give them a basic on the story with a little bit of detail and a little bit of history. And then say, all right, that's the world you're starting in. And that helps. It helps keep it in kind of in check, not necessarily in check, but it helps keep them on the path where they're not making this off the wall, this character that doesn't really jive with the storyline, the area, or even the genre sometimes.
The lone wolf. Sometimes.
It's so great to be a lone wolf, but it's a great thing, when you're like a lone dinosaur in in the year 2030, that just doesn't work.
Yeah, you're showing up to a high fantasy game with your beer and pretzels character, right? And it just doesn't mesh. And that session zero is a great opportunity to lay that out. This is the kind of game that I'm thinking of putting on. Or what do you guys want to see in a game? Because oftentimes you can hit up on what everybody is really looking for. Some of the best movies, and I always go back to the Marvel movies, especially the Avengers, because I'm a huge nerd and I liked comic books growing up, but they give you a lot of everything, and that's why they're really entertaining.
Yeah.
You get your drama, and you get your bits of comedy and your action, and it works nicely. And I think a lot of players, especially ours, they like those little bits of levity in a game if it's like been really intense. So we've had some pretty intense game sessions, be it with combat or party conflict or just loss of characters.
Oh, there's been weeks where people have stormed out of the game and came back the next week and were still pissed.
Yeah.
At what another character did or another player said or something like that. Because our players have a tendency to get fairly invested in their characters.
Deeply.
Well,
deeply
we've been playing them for years upon years sometimes.
Right. Yeah. And every once in a while you'll hit on that one character that for you is really, really works, and everyone just accepts it, and like, wow, that's so unlike the person, but the persona is so believable and so well rounded that they just adopt it, and whether they like the character or not is another matter. The fact that they like it, and they're like, okay, this is a real well-rounded, and they love the character. So you get those conflicts sometimes, and it transfers over to the players quickly. And now we'll take it full circle. It takes you back to, all right, I'm pissed at him, so now I'm going to do this to him because he did that to me. And okay, party conflict's one thing, but
Party revenge
is another, and that's where the rules come back into play. We have not necessarily a lot of house rules, but we have a few here and there, and they're somewhat loosely interpreted. It's a case by case situation in most times, but the group is pretty good at sticking to them.
Yeah, and there's a handful. Especially when we go away on our gaming vacation, but they're, they pack a punch. They cover a lot of ground. Those few rules, and one of it is, the big one is, don't ruin the fun of the other players. It's just unfair, and it's it's not what the game's about.
Right, and I'm not saying that people have to adopt our rules, but you should come up with rules for your table that fit your table. If if it could be just the time you play, right? We start at 6 and we end at 10. We have to end at 10 because that's when mom goes to bed or grandma goes to bed and someone's got to go to work or something like that. And, all right, I want to keep playing. This is awesome. Well, nope, sorry. The house rule says we stop at 10 or 11 or whatever. It could be as simple as just the time. It could be, hey, let's keep the profanity to a minimum. There are children in the house.
Yep.
We don't worry about that here.
Right.
We are profane riddled at our tables, but we are all more than older people.
Well, yeah.
And there's no kids in the house, so you kind of get away with a certain amount of levity. But again, that's a house rule that works here.
And I think one of the other ones that we have is, if we have inter-party conflict between characters, don't let it travel over to the folks themselves.
Right. Yeah. We will, if it looks like people are getting heated, and it looks like the player is getting aggravated with another player, there's more than enough of us that will, because we've been together long enough, we will pull them aside saying, dude, just let it ride. It's just goofy. He had a bad day and he needs to take it out on somebody, and it just happened to be your character or did something that you didn't like. But don't, it's not against you.
Right.
And meanwhile, someone's got the other person aside going, dude, you did it dirty. You did him dirty, and you really can't do that. It's going to piss him off. I understand you had a bad day, or the wife, you got an argument with the wife, or you were late to the game, or whatever the excuse is. But don't take it out on the people, and don't use the characters as an excuse to take it out on the people.
Right. Shake hands, offer an apology for your transgression, and let's move on. Let's have a good time. We're all friends.
Hey, dude, I was a dick, and I'm sorry. I didn't mean it, and I kind of took it too far. Hey, it's not against you. And that more than often will take care of the situation, and everything. Next week, it's like, oh man, last week you were such an SOB. It's like, okay, and boom, done.
Yep. Well, and that's usually how it goes, too, especially with our table. We're very good with each other.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with, I'm not going to say it's our age, because we're all still basically 12. We're just trapped in 50-year-old bodies. But we've been gaming together.
To be 50.
For a long time. So we all know what upsets the other person.
Yeah.
And what's kind of off limits. Yep. But if you don't know, then you really have to have that conversation. What's off limits? Do you I've had DMs that relished in torturing a character. Do you fade to black, or are you okay with the sadist at the end of the table, describing the bamboo shoots going up your fingernails or whatever, know those boundaries, and respect them.
Again, that goes back to knowing your players.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, the other thing is with your house rules, stay consistent. That even with the rules in the book will tell you right out it's a guideline. Mm-hmm. All right, it's not a Bible.
You got to remember that, everybody, too. That's
it keeps everyone on the same page, but it is not the end all and be all. Right? It is always open for interpretation, but be consistent in your interpretations.
Yep.
Okay. If all your kobolds have 17 hit points, then they always have 17 hit points. They're not going to have 42 next week and only 6 the week after that. And yeah, there's a lot to be said for scalable foes and scalable monsters. But be consistent in your rules, no matter what they are. And that will help keep things in check because people will know what to expect. They know where they're supposed to go. They know what they're supposed to do. Rules are there for a reason to make sure everyone has a good time. And if you waffle on the rules, then they're going to test the boundaries all the time, and then there's going to be chaos.
Yeah, and everything breaks down when that happens. So you really do. You have to have that structure of rules that because your players are going to make an effort to adhere to those rules. You know, they're going to be respectful of them because a lot of times if you really have a discussion with your players, they're the ones helping to establish those house rules.
Oh, in most cases, yeah.
Well, almost all cases.
Yep. And to wrap things up, I think we need to talk about what is probably the most important role as the game master, and I think oftentimes you're that person that's organizing the event. And this is where it's key. You can't have a game if there's no organization. I think of 11 years ago, Bill and I organized our week-long gaming vacation, and we've been doing it. Well, I think this is the 12th year.
Yeah, we're coming up on the 12th year, yeah.
We are on 12, I think, yeah.
Yeah. Assuming they lift all the quarantines and everything, it's our intention to go. This will be our 12th year, and we organized the event.
Sitting in my kitchen on my day off, and he looks at me and goes, "Remember when we were kids and you grabbed your dice bag and your Crown Royal bag full of dice and your books, and you ran over to Bobby's house because their parents had the beat up banquet table in the cellar, and they didn't care how much noise you made, and you'd go over Friday right after school and all day Saturday and all day Sunday till your parents picked you up Sunday night." He looks at me now and goes, "I want to do that again." I said, "Yeah, find one of our houses where one of us doesn't end up divorced by the end of the weekend." But 45 minutes later, we had a place and a bunch of people and a menu and the building of a scenario.
Yep.
And that started the whole thing.
Yeah, and you of course, you don't have to organize on that big of a scale, but really, you should try it.
You won't regret it.
Yeah, if you have a group of folks you've been gaming with for a while, go spend a week with them and game all day.
Well, we didn't start as a week. We actually started as a long weekend.
Yeah, a long weekend was nice, but start as a week.
Yeah.
Definitely go for the week if you could get away with it.
Yeah, we've since progressed to that point where first it was a long weekend, then it was a day added to the beginning, and then a day added to the end, and another day at the beginning. And
we used foot in the door syndrome. It's usually used in criminal enterprises, but in this case, we used it to convince our significant others that it was a good idea, just little by little.
They believed it too.
Yeah. They were probably 10 steps ahead of us. They were
sure
I hope they're going to go for a week.
That's my wife says that every single. Can't you leave now?
Yeah. How about a month?
Yeah,
that'd be great.
If you come back, okay. Just don't make any noise when you come in the house. You're right. You got to organize it. Whether it's a weekly game, you got to have a place that you can go to. Now, if it's a rotation where, all right, we're going to be at Lou's house this week, and Scott's and then mine, then Lou's, then Scott's and mine. That's fine, as long as everyone knows.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Don't leave it out in the open. Let them know, put your game together. Who's going to be the game master? Who's going to bring this? Who's going to bring that? Is there food involved? Is there drink involved? Who's good? Or whose turn is it to bring the case of Coke?
Yeah.
Whose turn is it to bring the pizza?
Bring snacks. Establish that it's more important than your characters at session 0.
Yep.
Establish that. Don't show up without snacks.
I will say right now, I have always been susceptible to bribes. Most of them edible. So.
Or drinkable.
Yeah. Well, now that I'm older, yeah. You'd be surprised where a bottle cap and a pop and a little bit of, But, bribe your game masters. whether it works or not, it'll keep them in a good mood at least for the first 10 minutes. So you're not the first to die. Yeah, I know. I know.
It works.
I know it's shameless,
Yes.
to as the person who game masters all the time to say bribe your game master. It works.
Oh, I know.
It works.
I'm usually whoever's game master. You need a drink? I'll be right back. I'll run to the bar, go get them a drink. I know I'm safe
Yes,
for a
you
little
do.
while.
Yes, you do. It gives you a little bit of a respite, just a bit. Whether it's so we talk about our week-long game. We've been doing this for coming up on 12 years. Whether it's that, whether you're bringing everyone to a convention, a gaming convention,
Yeah.
organize, get your transportation set up, who's going to drive, where are you going to go, how far is it, tickets, things like that. Scott and I have gone to Gen Con a couple times and a bunch of cons as well. Together, we he takes care of one aspect, I take care of the other. Boom, everything's done. We're off and flying. Organize it. Write it down on a pad. Make sure you cross your T's, dot your I's. Whether it's the weekly game, a week-long game, going to a convention. I don't care if just as a group. The whole group gets together. Let's go to King Richard's Fair.
Yep.
Instead of gaming on Saturday, let's all pile into a vehicle and let's go to a Ren fair. It's still a club activity, and you'd be surprised that something as goofy as just doing that on the spur of the moment can inspire both your players and your game masters. See something going, that is cool. That would make a really good encounter, or this or that or thing. It's amazing what gets the juices flowing sometimes for creativity.
And I think it makes for a more cohesive group of players, too. I think of when we go away, we'll game from 9 in the morning till about 5:30 at night.
Yeah, 5:36.
Yep.
And then we have the rest of the night where we'll sit down and shoot the breeze or play board games or go to a movie or, something. But doing something outside of the game, organize those things with your gaming group that aren't necessarily game related.
No, it creates that bond, that friendship.
Go out and be friends and, solidify that bond of friendship, because that's going to translate over into your gaming table too. As the DM, I think sometimes people look at you for almost every aspect of the game, even non-game related stuff.
You got to be careful. That could be a trap too, because they expect you to do everything. But as a
This
game,
is coming from the guy who's cooked every meal at our week-long getaway for the past dozen years. He knows. From experience, he knows.
Hey, I do what I love. But don't be afraid to assign something. Who's willing to do? All right, we're going to the Ren Fair. All right, somebody who's been to one, really? Okay, do me a favor. Find out how much the tickets are. How much does this cost? How much does that cost? Can you take? I got to write the scenario for this coming week. Can you do me a favor and just make a couple phone calls? Delegate a little bit, and that way you can say, hey, Lou put this whole thing together, not me. I just run the game. Lou's the one to put together this, and Scott put this together. We did a ghost hunt.
Yes.
Yes, we did. We went to a supposed alleged haunted house, and it was another thing that we did together. We still got to do that Scotch tasting. I still have the tickets over there.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm waiting for that one too.
I think there's a few people that are.
But there's a number of things as a group, and like I said, Lou says this all the time. He comes to the game because he wants to hang with his friends. The game is just an excuse to do it. Now Lou enjoys his game. You can tell by how much chaos and havoc that he wreaks. He enjoys his gaming. But he's right. You're with a bunch of friends. Now, the three of us have known each other for 30-something years. There's no reason why someone else can't have friends that they've been together for 30 years and start a game. You already got the friendship solid.
Yeah, exactly.
But our friendship built not necessarily around the game, but it certainly helped. Yep. And we did a lot of things outside the game as well. Yep. But that helps nurture the friendship. And come all the way back to the beginning. You have your story, all right? But your story is how you get your friends together. It's the reason why all your friends show up. But hopefully these are your friends showing up. Yes. And it's not just the story. It's not just the game. It's the experience of it, sharing this with your other friends.
That's what makes the hobby great.
That's what makes the hobby.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what keeps it going.
It's something to do with your friends. So if nothing else, get a hold of your friends. Your house rules, up to you. You know, how you handle it, up to you. Your story, up to you. Your genre, up to you. But have fun. Have fun, and have fun with your friends.
Well, thank you, guys. And that's going to conclude this episode. We'd like to thank you for listening.
Like us on Facebook.
Please subscribe.
Share with your friends.
And listen to new episodes every Tuesday.
And we'll see you next week in the Dungeon Master's Dojo.